Hello class, today we're going to be talking about the Electoral College. I'm not sure how much any of you know about the Electoral College or if you know what it is. Perhaps you've heard some of your family members talking about it. Well, today, if you don't know, you're going to learn. All right, so what is the Electoral College? The Electoral College is really the name given to the process by which the United States of America elects its president, right? So it's important for us to understand it's not a place, it's not a school that people go to. Nobody gets a degree from the Electoral College. It's simply a system that we have that allows us to elect the president in a way that some, quite honestly, deem is more fair, some deem is less fair. You can each be the decider of that. But today we're just going to learn what the role of the Electoral College is, how it functions, and what it does for our government. So basically what the Electoral College does is it turns the presidential race, the race for the White House, into a bunch of state-based elections, right? So every state has an assigned number of electoral votes, and it's equal to their total representation in Congress. So you may remember in one of our earlier lessons we talked about how in one house of Congress every state is given 2 members, and how in the House of Representatives it's dependent on population. So for instance, I'll use New York as an example because that's where I live, and New York State has 27 members in the House of Representatives, 2 members in the Senate, and so a total of 29 electoral votes. And so, the power of a state in the Electoral College is largely determined by its representation in Congress and its population. And then, so there's 100 members of the Senate, 435 members of the House of Representatives, and then 3 votes are also given to the District of Columbia because that's the minimum number that any state could have. And of course, the District of Columbia isn't a state, but because it does not belong to any other state, it's not fair that the people who live in the capital city would have no say in electing the president. So 3 votes were also given to the District of Columbia, right? So that brings the total number of electoral votes to 538. So how does the system work? On election day, you would go to your polling place and you cast your vote. In each state, all the votes are tallied, and whoever gets the most gets all of the electoral votes from that state. So again, using New York as an example, if you get 50.01% of the vote in New York, well, that's a slight majority, and no matter how slight it is, you will get all 29 of New York's electoral votes. If you were to win a slight majority in Texas, you would get all 38. So it's a winner-take-all system in every state except for Maine and Nebraska. They have a little bit different rules of how they administer votes, and sometimes you can have the votes be divided between 2 different people, 2 different parties. But whichever party wins for the state, they're allowed to choose electors, which will officially cast the votes. So if a Democrat wins a state, they get to, the Democratic Party gets to choose electors from that state to cast the official electoral votes on a later date. So you're going to choose people, obviously, that are going to vote the way that you want them to. It doesn't always happen. There's very few times where someone votes outside of what they were supposed to, but it happens so rarely that it's almost negligible. We can, for all intents and purposes, forget about it. And so you have to get, in order to become president, a total of 270 votes. Now, 270 might seem like a random number, but we get to that number because, remember, there's 538 total votes. Half of 538 is 269. So if you have 270, it is a small majority in the Electoral College, but it is a majority nonetheless. So why was this process established? Well, one of the reasons was to speed up the process of deciding a winner. So remember, in the 1780s, when they're at the Constitutional Convention, they don't have any computers or email or, video or any of the technology that we have today. So conducting an election was a much grander task. All the ballots were paper, of course. And so for them to be counted at a national level, they would have likely had to have been transported, probably to Washington, D.C., which would have been the capital, and then counted there. So it seemed a lot easier to have each state count, so that the ballots don't have to necessarily travel as far. And, the state counts it up. They can do it much quicker because it's less ballots in the first place. And then they say, hey, so and so won our state. And the next state, hey, well, so and so won our state. And so by assigning each state a number of electoral votes, whoever wins gets this many electoral votes. And it was just a much quicker and more efficient way of counting the vote than trying to do so at a national level. And then the other reason that it was established is to make sure that a candidate was reaching out to people from a variety of states. The needs of people in New York are very different from the needs of people in Georgia, which differ from the needs of people in Virginia and Massachusetts, and so on and so forth. So the Electoral College, because now it turns the whole election process into a series of state elections, in order for a candidate to win, they have to tailor their appeal to people from a variety of different backgrounds, different parts of the country. And so it was considered that, having this system and making a candidate reach out to so many different types of Americans gave them a more authentic and a more dignified rule over the country, because so many different people from so many different walks of life all agreed that this was the candidate that should run the country or could best run the country. All right, so that's a little quick bit about the Electoral College. It's still a controversial topic. There are some who believe we should get rid of it. However, we've had the system from the very beginning. It's been used in every presidential election to date, and so to change it would, in a lot of ways, be going against the established order of of what Americans have done so far. But there's some merit to both sides of the argument, because in a lot of ways it's not fair that a state's worth, or the worth of an individual vote, is dependent upon which state you live. It is mathematically possible for someone to lose the popular vote but win the electoral vote, as happened in our most recent election. And so that has a lot of people questioning the authenticity of this system. So this is a hot topic issue, and it's one that you guys will likely be instrumental in finding an answer to. So it's important that we know about it and we know how it works. And also, so that we can be, good Americans and participate in our government, knowing full and well how our votes are counted and how electoral votes are administered. All right. So when you come to class, we'll be doing some activities with the Electoral College. For now, take care.